Hi, everybody. It's me, Cynthia Garrett, and I hope that you were with us last week because we have been hanging out with a Christian hip-hop artist by the name of Sho Baraka Lewis, better known by his stage name, Sho Baraka. For those of you who were with us last week, we left off at a great place, and we're going to pick up there this week. Joining us, as always, is Christina Reynolds on the piano. And Sho, welcome back. Thank you for hanging around for another week. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. You know, last week we were kind of getting into the great area of, you know, segregation in Christianity, which is like it's the church. You know, there's the divide with black church and white church almost, black music and white music. And I guess, you know, what does it mean to be a Christian in the world today in terms of our responsibility to break down those walls?
Mm-hmm. I think we first must realize is that God made us not in kind of like a homogeneous, monolithic way, but he made us in diversity. Right. And so diversity is fine, like diversity is good. And God encouraged and forced diversity at the Tower of Babel, right? So when people wanted to be one kind of monolithic creature or being, he's like, no, this is not how I wanted to create you. And I think that affirms this idea that we should celebrate our diversity and our differences. And as many people will say, like this idea of color blindness is problematic because you're not seeing people, right? You're not seeing, you should be able to see the difference and celebrate the difference. The problem is that oftentimes within humanity, differences scare us, differences cause problems in us. It brings us fear. And so the gold of diversity is that we get to learn and appreciate and celebrate differences. The shadow of diversity is that it brings fear, and that fear causes hatred, racism, bigotry, et cetera, et cetera. When I think about some of the divisions in our churches and our spaces, I don't think it's all bad. I think you're going to congregate around people that you live and do life with. And oftentimes people live around folks who look like them, live like them, speak like them, right? However, when that becomes a marginalization or a prejudice against people, I think that's where we have a problem. And, you know, specifically in countries like areas like the UK or America, that could be a problem because of its great diversity. And because that diversity oftentimes is delineated through systems of injustice, whether it be, you know, economic injustices and racism or, you know, classism. And because of that, now it's easier for us to, because if you go to other countries, there's tribalism. If you go to other countries, there's caste systems. So you may have the same color, but people, you know, don't like a different person because of the type of tribe they come from or the family lineage. And so I think the gospel does a wonderful job of dividing those walls, like in Ephesians, it talks about. It's like making us one family, not in skin or language, but making us one family in the blood of Christ. And how do we begin to not create these fake communities? Like I would go to churches, and the way that they thought that they would reach black people is just by singing Kirk Franklin or Fred Hammond. And I'm like, that's not going to work, sir.
Oh, no.
But just be who you are and be a welcoming people, and don't try too hard. Don't shake my hand differently just because I'm black. Don't give me the what's up, dude, or what's up, bruh. You know, just be yourself.
Right.
And understand that in the context of relationships that I'm different, but, you know, allow us to have space to be hospitable and love one another in our differences. And I think oftentimes there's just there's not that cultural awareness or that cultural aptitude to say, you know what, I'm going to create space for people who are different from me to come and to help change me and to learn from them.
Absolutely. You know, I think one of the healthiest things in the world is to be curious about other people, not to act like you understand other people, because if I act like I understand you, it means that I'm okay with you. It means I'm cool. I'm jiggy with it. You know what I mean? It's like one of the funniest things about being a mom at this age to, like, you know, a 26-year-old son is that he and all my adopted boys I always know I'm not jiggy with it, and I always know I'm not cool. So I always have to be curious about their life and their world and their vernacular and their dialogue, because I love them. I want to know about them. I want to invest in them. I just love them. So all their differences, I want to celebrate as a mom. And I think love is such a big part of curiosity. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
And one way to get to their heart is to stop using the word jiggy. They don't. That's that's the first step. We're gonna get rid of that word.
By the way, that is so far back in the dinosaur days of Will Smith. Like, that's when Will Smith first hit the scene. I don't even think Christian rap existed back then.
We're gonna stop using that word. That's we're going today on, what is it? The June the 6th, the 5th, whatever. Today, that day, that word is done.
2019, it's over.
No resurrection.
No, exactly.
So yeah, no, you make a good point though. You make an excellent point, and there's a way of connecting with people culturally, and just we are learners, and I think that's the beautiful thing about humanity. Like, and we were talking off air how Americans need to travel more. Man, when I started to travel around the country, around the world, better yet, that's when it made me a better, not only a person, but a better citizen of the world. And I realized not only how blinded I was, but I also realized how well educated every other country, or not every other country, but most people in other parts of the world were, because Americans tend to know their own history and their own culture, but we're not good students of the world. Totally. And one of the things I learned, especially in Africa, is that not only do they understand their country, they understand their continent, and they understand the world. Yeah. And one is by the many languages they speak. Yeah. And so that's when I realized I got to start learning the language. Yeah. I got to figure out something about my life, because right now, there was this amazing joke that and I'm sure you probably heard. It said, if you speak, multiple languages, you're African. If you speak one language, you're American. Right. So I was just like, okay. Right. But it's in a sense, we can laugh at it, right? But it's really, there's a lot of pride in it. We all know pride goes before a fall. So since I don't want to see our nation fall, I do think we have to kind of laugh, but we have to kind of heed a little bit of the warning, like, hey, we're not the only people and language on the planet. And especially as believers, our greatest desire and our greatest calling, we are called to evangelize the lost, right? Our greatest desire is to share the gospel. Well, in order to share with people, you have to speak their language. You have to reach across the divide and build relationship, which builds trust and confidence, in order to even have a platform to share. And absolutely. And one of the things that we talked about last week that we have to be mindful is that when we do the sharing and we do the evangelizing, is that our job is not to assimilate them into a culture, right? Right. Like, I'm not taking the cultural practices with me to Japan. I'm not taking these cultural practices with me to this particular country. I'm taking a gospel message to an indigenous people and saying, hey, this is the truth about Jesus. How can you take this truth and reproduce yourself in your own tribe and your own culture and people? Right. Oftentimes what we do is we take, like, there's stories of missionaries going to particular countries, taking the drums away from folks and giving them guitars, or taking their garb away from them and giving them pants and, khakis, or telling them they can't dance to their, this type of way. This is how you worship. Right. And I think that's an atrocity to how God has shaped us and developed us. And so I don't think that works in America for the culture of individuals who come from particular communities. And I don't think that works across the globe. You take the truth and the principles of the gospel and you share them. You don't take your culture and try to reproduce American. That is so well said, because I have friends who love Jesus who are Japanese who eat sushi. I have friends who love Jesus who are Hispanic who like enchiladas. I have friends who like soul food who love Jesus. Jesus is the common denominator. He's the real color we all share. We're really all blood red. We've been bought with a price, but we're all different.
And that's the beautiful
Yeah.
thing. That's the beautiful thing about God. He created this
Yeah,
incredible
amen.
palette, you know?
If you're a Christian and you don't like sushi and enchiladas, then I don't know if you're a Christian. I could
Yeah,
really,
we might have to actually
I
question.
can challenge that.
We might actually have to throw in a challenge.
That's like manna. That's what manna was in the scriptures. It was actually sushi and enchiladas.
Sushi. Not necessarily together, but on different days. Very, very
Different
very,
days, exactly.
Very, very good. Listen, I want to talk a little bit about, you have a song, and I guess kind of back up a little bit. And Christine and I were just really, like, we love the lyrics to a lot of your music. And you wrote a song called Get Wise. And it made me really, there's so much. That song is dealing with so much. What were you really wanting to say with Get Wise?
It's funny. We were talking about international kind of like awareness. I went to South Africa. The first time I went was in 2010, I think. And there was a term that I learned there called rejoins. I may be mispronouncing it, but it means get wise. And I took it back and I would say it all the time. Like, that was the way that they introduced, well, that's what I was told. And now that I have friends out there, that's how I kind of introduce. Like, it's like the what's up in America, right? It's like the rejoins me, right?
Right.
And so for me, I was like, wow. And when they told me it meant like get wise, like, I was like, this is it's pertinent on so many levels. And when I wrote the song, I was like, we as a people need to get wise. And oftentimes there's a lot of talk around stuff, but there's no real application. And so I wanted to challenge academics. I wanted to challenge pastors. I wanted to challenge artists about all the things that we espouse on our different platforms, but are we really active in doing the work? And oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, many times we can say no. It's like we talk a good game, but it's really about our own platforms that we're trying to sustain versus really enacting change in our communities and our cities.
Wow, we're trying to, in a lot of ways, when things are good, there's this tendency to want to maintain the status quo rather than continually challenge yourself out of your comfort zone for the better.
And are we willing to sacrifice our own platforms, our own selfish interests, and our own well-being for the benefit of other people? I think when you think about sacrifice, that's Jesus. That's the gospel. Jesus had it all. First of all, he created all things. And to come to invade earth and to give of himself for the well-being of other people so that other people may have life. I think that is the template for how we're to live, is how do we step on the scene and say, I must sacrifice my life so that other people may have life, so other people may know the fullness of God. Right. And I have platforms. Jesus had a platform. He was willing to give up all of that or to use it for the benefit of other people. Right. And so whether you're a pastor, you're a radio host, a TV host, a musician, how do we use these platforms for the betterment of people? And that's not just the preaching of the message, but the doing of the message as well. Like, you give platform to people, right? You're giving opportunity for individuals like Christina to showcase her talent. And Christina's using her talent to share a message, and hopefully, we'll reciprocate that in different ways. God has given me a platform. I want to bring other artists up and, share not only my wealth and my information, but my time and my physical space for people. So I think that's what Jesus did and sacrificed in so many areas in so many ways. And I just want to be able to communicate a message that talks about a gospel in that light.
I got to tell you, though, it's so interesting to me. Well, two things are hitting me. It must have been like bug out incredibly awesome to think of you and Lecrae and Tadashi and all these guys like rolling around together, what your conversations must have been like at a certain point. That's awesome. That's awesome. And then the other side of it is it takes an incredible amount of confidence. I realize this. I realize it all the time because I've gone through all of the feelings of it. But it takes an incredible amount of confidence in Jesus and in Jesus's plan for your life to know that platforms are given to be shared.
Amen. And I love the way you say it takes confidence to believe that, because this is the other thing. The flip side of that is that you try to hold on to it or you hoard it, right?
Yep.
But the reality is it's going to be taken away from you anyway. So what are you hoarding for? It's best to use it and then to share it on not only to give praise to God, but then you in a lot of ways you get praise from people as well for how you used it.
Yeah.
But when you hoard it, you're not only creating an offense towards God, but you're offending people, and nobody's going to applaud you for not being gracious with what you have, right? And that's not the only reason why we do things is for the approval or the applause of individuals, but it's good to be appraised and to be loved by folks, right?
Yeah.
And so in our work, we do that, and we know when we do those things, that stuff will come, right? He will provide those things.
Yeah.
But I will say this: the reason to kind of like to touch on the conversations with the individuals that I came up with, I realized that the reason why we are this, because we're educated, we read a lot, we're cultured individuals, we travel the world, and to your point, I think it's just necessary for Christians to know the world, to know not just to. I hate this is going to sound weird. Oftentimes we just spend time in our kind of like our Christian huddles.
Yeah.
And those things are necessary, but we have to, you have to get to the place where you're exploring the world, you're meeting people. Don't be afraid to navigate in non-Christian spaces, to be around people who don't share your view, because you got to know what the world believes. You got to understand how the world thinks. I love Paul in Acts chapter 17, where he goes to Areopagus and he sees all these philosophers talking about their gods, and he's like, well, this is interesting. Let me tell you about my God, right?
Right.
And so he invades this space, and he's like, hey, y'all talking? Let me go ahead and rap with you a taste about, the God I believe in. And I think that's one of the things that we've tried to make a staple in our life, is to be educated, not only academically, but culturally.
Do you? That's so well said. I mean, yeah, I know. I don't want to hog him. Do you have any thoughts?
I do have thoughts. I have a question for you, because clearly from your music, you're not just throwing fluff out there. Like, you clearly have a message, and you're using your platform, and you're sharing and all that. Like, what is the two things? What is the fruit that you've seen come from that? And also, have you felt like pushback because you're so vocal about very serious topics?
Yeah. So there's fruit. Sometimes you don't get to always see it immediately. And so, I think my experience in the gospel and just having a relationship with Jesus is that he sustains me enough for me to see some of the fruit. And to, it's like the Ebenezer's or the stones in the Old Testament, where the families were told to leave stones so that when their kids come by, they would ask about it. And this is a testament to how God was faithful in the past, right? And every time I'm able to kind of see what the Lord has done for me, or how he's used me in the lives of people, it encourages me to keep going, because there are times when I've had the pushback and I've gotten ostracized. I've had concerts protested. I've heard people write false things about me in papers or in publications. I've read and heard people say things about me that weren't lies, but they were out of context, I guess you can say. And then there's just the people who just don't understand you. And you have to get to the point where you're cool with them not agreeing with you, and you guys having differing views on different things. And I think that's where I've landed, Christina, is that I am content with recognizing that I am just different from other folks, and God has shaped me as a particular individual, and there's a reason why I'm not as famous as other folks, and I have to be content with that, because God has given me a particular call.
Yeah.
God has gifted me to be something, and I can't be jealous with the folks on my left or my right, or the folks who come after me. Is because maybe he's using me to create a lane for other folks. Maybe he's gifted me to speak out on things so that people after me, because I'm only standing on the shoulders of giants, and I'm hoping that I can be a platform for other people to step on and to create greater impact. And so, I've seen my share of praise, and I've seen my share of critiques and criticism. Yeah. But glory be to God that he sustains and keeps me.
I don't think that any artist can get through their life or their career without seeing their share of praise, and then at the same time criticism. And then the sort of other side of all of that is when you get criticized for the same thing that someone else will praise you for, or the thing you know is the good thing about you that God put in you. I mean, I remember on my first big show, I became the first woman of color to ever be given a network late night show in America. Now, I never really trip on it, but I guess it was a big deal. And I guess it is a big deal for young women of color who will look at me and go, wow, she did it. Now, I was dealing with me. I didn't really have time to trip on the titles. But it's interesting because I remember reading the criticism that hurt me the most in that year, 2000, 2001. This guy wrote in and he said, she's so nice, it's like I almost can't watch the guests like her so much.
What?
Right. I mean, I was a little bit booty sore about that. I was really hurt by that comment. And it's so interesting because I think about it to this day, because now what I realize is that he was attacking me. That's the enemy. He was attacking me for the thing that really and truly it is the best thing about me, is that I like people, and I enjoy if people feel that I'm warm to them so that they like me. I like to share. And that is not a worldly quality. And when God starts using you in ways that are about kingdom, all of a sudden, the only playing field that the enemy can attack you on is this one right here. It's the secular. So in a lot of ways, criticism can be constructive, but as Christians, are we really supposed to criticize each other on social media?
Oh, social media is, oh my God, that's a whole nother episode.
Right. I mean,
it's such a beautiful thing, but it's also it can be a cesspool of just terrible interactions and thoughts. It's just, it scares me because I have a daughter who's 14, and to think most of her interactions are happening through social media. It's just, I hate to be that old curmudgeon who's like, back in our day. but it's just I was just like, I can see the social kind of deficiency in her, and other kids her age is like, you guys can't even look each other in the eye.
For real.
You don't know how to compliment one another. It's just like, these things are just it's heartbreaking. And we live in a world that over critiques, because it's easy to critique on social media because there's a veneer that I can live behind. Like, I'm an avatar, and I can say whatever I want. I can critique however I want. And there's no charity in my thought. When you're in front of somebody and you give critiques, you have to be very mindful, because you may get punched in your mouth when you say something to them, right?
Exactly.
And so, but I think social media has removed that filter that I think is needed in society. Yeah. And so, even when you're looking at a TV, to hear a man make that statement, he's projecting his insecurities on you. Like, why does she have to be rude? And it's, so anyway.
Right. But in all honesty, when I think about what a lot of secular media really is, it's the shows where people are rude to each other that are the ones that are glorified in the world that we live in. Which of course then always makes me ask the question, then why are we, as believers, we got to also run after building up the kingdom, not just building up the secular world. So we've got to make it better in the kingdom about supporting each other and celebrating the different lanes that we all run in to express our Christianity and to express our creativity. And by support, I mean also financial. Because I always say, Christian people are the first to say, oh, well, Christian media can be so cheesy, or why do I have to go over there and work for free? Well, if we would value what we do and pay people what they're worth, then you begin to draw the best of the best of the best. And it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
If I can get on a soapbox real quick, because
go for it.
So not only financially, but I would also say creative expression is so stifled in Christian spaces that, even if we have the money, I feel like there's the reason why the world or mainstream market makes such great art is because they're willing to take more risks than we are. And I think when one of my favorite literary artists is Flannery O'Connor, and she makes a statement, something like this. She says, And I think this is the reason why a lot of Christian art is bad. He says when you make sin cheap, you make grace cheap. Right? And oftentimes in our Christian art, we don't take risks because we don't want to glorify sin, right? Because we make sin out to be so cheap that when we talk about this idea of redemption in those same stories, grace looks cheap. When your gangsters in your movies only say frickin' and, ooh, flim farn, like it's like, well, what kind of gangsters you living around?
Not the ones in my neighborhood.
Exactly. And so, and we just struggle and obstacles and the plight of our communities are just dumbed down to these palatable kind of pills that we can swallow. And that's not the world. That's not the world we live in. Our world we live in is dark oftentimes. It's despairing and it's hurtful and it seems hopeless. And when you create redemption from that dark, from that despair, it makes the gospel so much more beautiful.
Yes.
And so we need that financial support, but we also need the freedom to create from darkness to light.
That is so well said and has so been the theme of conversation around here the last few weeks of programs, because in all honesty, it's like it's not about glorifying the dark. It's about glorifying the light. And when, we had a gentleman on by the name of Sam Childers recently, who was the subject of a film called Machine Gun Preacher, and his journey, it was made as a secular film, right? And
I remember the film, yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost shocking to see his journey. But to me, all I ever saw in that was the incredible redemptive and transformative power of the God that we serve. And I have just never heard it put the way you just put it, but that is so well said. When we make grace cheap, grace is not cheap. Grace came at a huge, huge price, and it's gigantic. Every day, I think about the grace of being able to wake up and have a chance to risk life again. Because every day we risk life, right? I mean, we may make a mistake trying to parent this way or trying to, work this way or that way. But grace, grace. So listen, we're out of time. We have about 10 seconds. I want to give you the wrap up comment as Christina plays us off.
So I can say anything.
Yeah, you can say anything. You have the floor.
Well, as we close the doors of the church, Christina gives us a No, I just, first of all, once again, thank you for using your platform. And I think for all those who are listening, one thing I would just say is, as you continue to strive to know God more, recognize that God made us to be in community with other people. And so he's redeeming our relationship with him. He's redeeming our relationship with other people. But then also, how we work and what we do and how we create impacts our relationship with God and our relationship with other people. And so knowing Jesus is pivotal into knowing how to love other folks and to love how we do and how we serve the world.
Man, that was really well said. Amisho, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
See, it's always good when I'm obedient to our Father, you guys. So I just want to thank you for hanging with us on this session, and I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. Amisho's information has been on the bottom of the screen. You can check him out, and there's another album in you, brother, and I'm waiting for it. I'm Cynthia Garrett. We gotta go. I'll see you next week. Hi, everyone. It's me, Cynthia Garrett. I hope you're enjoying the sessions. And I just wanted to encourage you to pick up a copy of Prodigal Daughter, A Journey Home to Identity. It's my testimony. And you know, I always say that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Our testimonies are our story of what God has done in our life. So I hope that you'll share this journey with me through my book and through the many lessons that God taught me through sexual abuse, rape, cancer, being a single mom, and dealing with all kinds of issues just like every one of you has dealt with. Prodigal Daughter. I hope you'll pick up your copy today.